Carmelite history. The Carmelite tradition began with Elijah in the 12th century. 1155, the Crusaders reached Holy Land. There was Saint Barthol and 10 people who organized a community. Saint Brocard was the successor of Barthol, spread the order in Holy Land, and the root was given by Saint Albert of Jerusalem, who was the then bishop. 15 foundations were made. Blessed Virgin Mary was considered as a sister by the Carmelite hermits. When the Muslims attacked, the Mount Carmel was massacred at a Salve Regina in 1291, and return was possible only in 1631. In the West, in the France, Italy, Paris, Scottish, England, there was lack of relevancy for a hermitage life. In the 13th century, there was money, commerce, and animosity with the clergy. The Fourth Lateran Council in 1215 made many adaptations to the Carmelite rule. Saint Simon Stock, in the middle of the 13th century, received a vision of Our Lady, who is said to have given him the brown scapula and even composed a prayer to Our Lady. Thus, he was the prior general and he made many reforms. He moved the mendicant order to the cities where they used to preach. There was protection from the Pope given so that they could pursue also now university studies. Nicolas, Frenchman, who was the successor, wanted more of solitude. He disapproved many of the Carmelite ways, and there was loss of the Elysian spirit. Ralph German, who was the successor, wanted more of solitude. In Marseilles, Las Elegantes, and Hune, the original from the traditional abbeys were formed. Peter Emilien, who was a Frenchman, he made 33 provinces with Spain, Rome, Germany, and Aquitania. They started adapting to European customs. White mantles were used. Membership between the clerics and the lay brothers was possible. Full approval was given by Boniface the Eighth and later John the 13th in 1299. In the 14th century, Saint Albert of Trapani, who was in Messina, he was he studied a lot and he was an intellectual. John Cunningham also, they formed an institution book which was used till the middle of the 14th century. There were other important saints like Saint Andrew Corsini, Saint Peter Thomas. In the late 14th and 15th century, they experienced a decline and a mitigation because of the 100 years of war between France and England and lots of destruction. They were called as soldiers. There was the Black Death due to the plague. 75 years there were struggles and only deaths. The Western Schism, the order was divided. John Grossi then made the general of United Order. There was relaxation of poverty, profession, and professors were allowed to retain their salaries. There was no office, no community acts. Only food was taken in common. Some had their own servants. Young boys were brought to study and then made religious at an immature age. There was no dedication, fast, discipline, silence, only amusement and affairs. After 150 years, General Bartolomeo Roncalli, who was elected later, protested and validity was made by Bishop of Marseilles, the Vicar of Venice. Then General John Fassi of Avignon. Also, Roncalli mitigated the rule and loss of the essence of the prophetic vocation. There was no solitude, fast, abstinence. You could walk around freely, converse with anybody. There was no prayer. And this was fully accepted in Spain. In the 15th and 16th century, attempts were made to revive the order. We have Blessed John Baptist Spagnoli and then the Mantua Reform, Louis Ambrosio and the Albi Reform in France, Genoa Reform in Italy. And John Sorre, the then general, traveled and encouraged the reforms and encouraged more of prayer, solitude, and fidelity, but there was no impact. Cypriot, who was the prior general, wrote on later, and there was also the Protestant Reformation that came, and the faith fell in Europe. The nuns were first in the 3rd century. Monastic life for women was started by the Benedictines and the Augustinian rule. Franciscans in the 12th century. But in the 14th and the 13th century, there were pious groups of women called Beguines who roamed in France, and Beatas, Mantenettes, Humiliates. There was no apostolate. But with John Sorret He affiliated the women's groups to the Carmel. The second order was formed by the Pope for anyone with the Benuin spirit, whereas the third order, lay apostolate, was for the tertiaries. These Benuin groups were first formed in Florence in Italy, then Holland, France, Germany, Lowlands, and their first blessed was Francie Ambroise in Brittany. She was a widow. At the time of St. Teresa of Avila, the Incarnation Convent in Spain was also a type of a Benuin spirit convent. We talk about the 16th century where John Rossi was the general from Rome. He was called Red or Rubio in Spain. He goes to Philip II, the king of Spain, who is interested in reform of the religious life in Spain and puts a committee of inquisition. The king approves of him. His was through visitation, yet he approved Teresa's reform. Be not under the Avila bishop, but the provincial of Castile. The friars first were formed in Medina. The prior was Antony de Heredia, who was 57 years old. With John of the Cross was 25 miles from Avila, and he was the son of Gonzalo and Catalina. He was the third of three children, and Catalina, one child died, one was abused by the doctor uncle, and he returns home. In Medina, John became an apprentice as a carpenter, tailor, artisan. He was seen by Don Alfonso Alvarez, who was a governor of the plague hospital in Medina. He lives in the hospital as a nurse and then collector of alms, goes to the Jesuit college, wanted to be a priest. Alvarez hopes for a chaplain in his own hospital, but he joins the Carmelites because protesters, so he steals away secretly. He studies in the order and then in the University of Salamanca, St. Andrew's College, and after he celebrates his first Mass in Medina, he meets St. Teresa of Avila, who wanted to go, he actually wanted to become a Cartesian. She stops him. So she has a second friar who wants to join her after Anthony. So then the monastery is formed at Durelo, next Toledo, but the foundation at Pastrana, there were two hermits, Mariano and Balthazar. There's Princess of Aboli who comes in and helps them. There is Ruse Gomez dies, and the Princess of Eboli is now in trouble in Pastrana. The convent is abandoned by the sisters, and Durello now moves to Mansera. John Rossi is not very content with the discussed reform that was formed in Spain. He's opposed in Andalusia, that is south of Spain. King Philip II forces a bull by Rome, orders to come under the bishop. There are two Spanish visitators. One is the Fernandez, one is Vargas. Fernandez sends Teresa to become prioress, and then as prioress to Incarnation in Avila for 3 years. And Teresa is then sent to Incarnation. Her spiritual father is Saint John of the Cross, who comes from Alcala. After 3 years, he goes to Segovia, Baez, and then Seville. John of the Cross has 5-year term in that small house with Germain, another helper in Incarnation. Jerome Gracian is a good friend of Saint Teresa of Avila. He also joins the Carmelite order, and Saint Teresa makes a vow of obedience to him. 7 monasteries are formed, the last 2. But Rossi wanted Discal's Carmelite out of Andalusia. He did not want monasteries to be formed. Fernandez goes to Castile, goes to the general for permission, whereas Vargas goes to Andalusia. He's not interested. Carl's monasteries are unstuffed. They're given to Discal's, and gets the property of Granada, brought Pastrana. Friars made Balthazar a visitator, another foundation at Ala Penula in Serra Morena. Balthazar is removed after 4 months, and Gracian becomes a visitator. Gracian is not welcomed. There is bitter rivalry between the Carls and the Discals. He's sent to Castile. He closes San Juan de Puerto and gives to the Carls, and he gets threat to his life. Seville has Carls. Now he starts Discals in the same city. Bishop Christopher de Roges won, but has financial issues. Nicolas Doria comes to help him as an ally. He's another friar. Gracia never informed Rossi of his post or work in Andalusia. The Carls provincials in Castile, Aragon, Catalonia, Andalusia, there's a meeting petition to general against Gracian to revoke his faculties. Gracian feared Rossi. There's no contact with Rome. Vargas is happy. The Gracian provincial of Carls in Andalusia, when he's refused, office is imposed on him. Rossi protests to the Holy See and visitators are revoked. Gracian goes to Philip II in Madrid and convinces him of the reform. Gracian goes to Saintly Nuncio Ornam Ormaneto. He issues a counter brief to Rossi and formed reformers of Castile as Fernandez and reformers of Andalusia as Vargas and Gracian. Teresa helps Gracian. The Carls of Spain attack both. The character assassination is done. They send information to Rossi. Rossi Piazza a chapter, but there are no discults. He wants to suppress them because they are disobedient and rebellious. Rules call them as contemplatives or primitives. Wear shoes but not sandals. There is no staff in hand. They sing mass on office in choir. Monasteries are approved only in Castile and others have to leave. Teresa says restoration work to be done. The name Sandals office, she writes to Rossi and affirms her loyalty, and she also helps Gracian. Rossi does not answer but issues an edict that Teresa must confine to a convent in Castile, sends her some Carmelites, Spanish Carmelites. She writes to him, hurt by his treatment. Settles for 1 year in Toledo. Then Teresa decides to separate from the Carls. Appeals to the King Philip II. He is hesitating. 4 years he takes to answer. Gracian is not complying with the Piacenza degrees. Another monastery is started in Al Calvario in Andalusia. The Carls complain to Rossi, and Rossi appoints a personal representative, a Portuguese Carmelite, Jerome Tostado, who comes, but Ornamento sends him to Portugal. But he returns after Ornamento's death immediately. Now Gracian Discal's meeting is called at Almodovar de Campo and separates the province and administers. John of the Cross and Anthony of Jesus support him, but the nuncio is already dead. Next, there is Nuncio Philip Sega, who is an Italian and indoctrinated against the Discalcs by Rossi, and he is against the reform. His favorite are the Calst friars, and Tostado returns back to Spain from Portugal. Tostado constructs case on Gracian. There are crimes of abuse, authority, immorality, and a bitter statement by Balthazar of Jesus, and later defends themselves as forced, but lost all respect, and he dies in Lisbon. Whereas Teresa gives them code names because difficult to communicate with Gracian and others. Tostado's visitation of the Incarnation finds John and Germain asked to leave, but John says he's appointed by Fernandez and only he can ask him to leave. Tostado and Fernandin Maldonado, prior of Toledo, asks to punish John. They attack their cottage and handcuff the two and send Germain to another monastery, but he escapes and he sends John to Toledo where he is tortured. The prison cell is only 6 feet wide, with a small slit in the wall and 10 feet long. The 8 months he spends summer and frigid winter with given only bread, sardines, and water. 3 nights he is knelt in the refectory, then circular discipline is given at length, yes, of the miserere, and Teresa writes letters to the king in vain, but no news of John's whereabouts. The king is also silent. John is continuously read the Piacenza Acts. He's asked to that all his work is in vain and he has to leave the Discalcs and join the Carls. He's abused, tormented. They tell him they will reward him as a prior, give him the gold cross and even gold if he leaves this reform. And afterwards, John of Valladolid is a new. He shows less strict, studies the whole flow plan, escapes the prison and rope of a blanket, which is 10 feet, and then jumps. Our Lady helps him in this miraculous escape. So thus we have the Saint John of the Cross finally freed. He comes to the hospital in Toledo where the Carmelite nuns treat him, and he's finally free and he joins the reform. In the Carmelite history, we have many figures like Teresa of Avila, who was very prudent and intelligent woman who taught us to pray. Saint John of the Cross, a mystic and a great poet and a writer. We have Nicholas Doria, who helps the Seville Foundation, and he's a Genova banker. He's on business with the king, gave all to the poor. He's ordained, joins the Carmelites, and he later becomes the important member in the Carmelite order. We have Gracian, who is from the Jesuit college in Madrid, joins the order in Pastrana. After 1.5 years, he becomes the superior. And he also helps the nuns, and he's very talented, eloquent, good judge, but not a good judgment. He's a good orator. We have the Dominican visitators who make a lot of issues. We have Peter Fernandez from Madrid. He's a visitator of Castile. We have Francis Vegas, who's Cordoba, Visitate of Andalusia. These are official representatives of Rome and not of Rossi. We have King Philip II was powerful in Netherlands, Italy, and he had colonies also established in America, North Africa. But he became bankrupt. I was anti-Roman and protested out against the and formed the Inquisitions. Then John Rossi wanted an inner restoration of the mitigated rule, gave permission for only 7 monasteries, and he opposed the Andalusian reform. He was very suspicious of the Discals later on, especially in the south, from Cordoba to Granada. And we have many people like King Philip, who Holy See supported him, not Rossi. And then orders were given in Spain under the bishop for the Inquisitions. There were also Nuncio Ormento, who had contact between the King Philip II and Rome, Pope Gregory the 13th. So there was Nuncio Sega. So these all people form an important part, and their characters shape the history of the Carmelite order.